Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Sanj, and in this video I wanted to cover a new way of scraping any website using a service called Vectorize.io. And what's interesting is that Vectorize helps you build like a RAG pipeline, so you can do various different objectives with it. They have a lot of different features. So imagine talking to a client or a prospect that has information. They have data stored on like a knowledge base, something like SharePoint, or they just have a bunch of information like on a Google Drive or Dropbox. Well, wouldn't it be a great idea, a great solution to sell them? And this solution basically takes all that information, indexes it, and then you can use an AI agent inside of NA10 to talk to that information and retrieve whatever data and information that you want. Okay, so in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how to build that inside of NA10. It's a great build because it's another use case for AI agents, which is all the rage right now because you can make a lot of money selling AI agents, building AI agents. Okay, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and build this automation. So this crawl RAG AI agent has 4 requirements, okay? The first one is we want to set up a pipeline inside of Vectorize.io. So Vectorize is an application that I've been using for the last couple of weeks. I think it's a really interesting use case or use cases as I'll show you shortly. And it's going to add a really interesting layer on top of what we already can do with AI and with Pinecone and RAGs in general, okay? Then the second step is we want to integrate that into Pinecone's index. Okay, so whenever we retrieve data, that data has to be stored somewhere, right? And effectively, it's just the index is just a database, right? So we're calling a database. Each database will be a unique RAG in its own kind of bubble there. And this is what we're going to build, right? So if you go into production, if you go and do this for clients, then each index will be basically like a database for each client, okay? Then the third step is you can crawl any website, you can put anything in here, including like YouTube channels as well, by the way. And the last step is to use the AI chat function inside of N8N with the RAG and then ask it as any questions that you would like. Okay, so let's head over to N8N. This is what the automation looks like. This is the AI agent. This is doing all the thinking for us. It's plugged into the OpenAI chat model because that's why I always use. But by all means, if you want to use another language model, test it out. The vector store is always going to be Pinecone because that's what I've been using since I started this channel. But there are other solutions out there if you want to test it out. And then the embeddings, I'm using the OpenAI embeddings purely because the language model is OpenAI, right? So I just want to keep it consistent. And you have to keep it consistent. And then here's the chat here. So this is how you would have a conversation with your RAG. Okay, so if I open up the chat, I've actually already indexed a website called Wait But Why, which is a very popular blog. And I actually referenced that in a previous video. So basically what I asked it was, what's the most popular blog post of 2024? And it's basically crawled the entire blog. This is what it's come back with. And there's various metrics that it uses, right? It could be comments, it could be views, if there's a view count, it could be number of shares, likes, comments on social media, etc., okay? And you can see the log here, exactly what it's done. If you click on output, if there is an output, if there's an input here, you can see it here and you can see exactly how it works, okay? So let me just hide this. This is Wait But Why. This is a really funny blog that I follow by Tim Urban. I'm told that Elon Musk is an avid reader, so make of that what you will, but it's really interesting content, right? And he's done it in a really funny, engaging way. So let me move on to the next step and show you how we set this up. I'm inside of Vectorize.io, and you can go ahead and sign up for a free account. But basically, there's a few things you could do inside of here, but the most interesting is you can build a RAG pipeline, okay? And what that means is that you can build a vector database. You can store your, the contents of the database inside of Pinecone, and it can be completely unstructured. It could be anything. It could be Google Drive, it could be Dropbox, it could be like SharePoint, where literally, clients, companies, organizations, they just dump information. I mean, I'm guilty of that, right? Like I've got Google Drive, I've got Dropbox. I pay for Dropbox, right? And a lot of it's very unstructured because I just use it to save personal stuff, and for work, it's usually Google Drive. There are folders and stuff, but there's better retrieval options, right? And an AI agent is definitely one of them, okay? So the thing that I want to do is build a pipeline, but I've already built one. So you're only allowed one pipeline on the free plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, go inside of here and show you what I did. And then I'll delete this, and then we can basically I'll show you exactly how to build this. Okay, so what I did was I went ahead and crawled the Wait But Why website, okay? And this has a total of 160 documents, almost 1,000 pages, and 1,629 vector stores, okay? And then there's a few things you can see inside of here, how long it took to crawl. But what's interesting is you've got the RAG sandbox here, okay? So you can actually have a conversation with it. using any language model that you want. Okay, so this one's set to Llama 70B by default, but you can choose DeepSeek. You've got GPT-4 Mini. There's OpenAI 03 Mini, Mistral if you want that one, a few others as well. Okay, so you can actually chat with the information in here as well. Okay, so this is basically using different language models to chat to the same data, which is what I did inside of NA10. Okay, but NA10 is obviously the more commercial application. It's something that you could package and sell to clients. Okay, so that's an option here, and there's a few other bits and pieces you can do inside of here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this because I only have one on the free plan. So let's go ahead and delete this, and then we're going to create a new RAG pipeline. So I just want to show you all the options that you have available to you. Okay, so select the source. And so the source can be anything you want it to be from this list here, okay? So imagine you've got a client that you want to sell a RAG solution to, right? They know they've got a bunch of data. They know they have a knowledge base, but it's very unstructured. But more importantly, their employees aren't using this data. They've got all this information, all this expertise. It's just sat there on a drive inside their organization, right? And that's obviously no good to anybody, because you want your employees to be constantly using that information, getting better, and you want it in return on investment, right? Like if you're spending money on like SharePoint or OneDrive or whatever, right, wherever your information is stored, right, that's not free. That you're spending money on that infrastructure. So as a business owner, a CEO, founder, you would definitely want a return on investment. Okay, so there's a few different ones here. The one I chose was a web crawler, and the seed URL was Weibo Y. Okay, but if you wanted to add a new connector, you just click on the add a new connector, give it a name, and then just put in the seed URL. Okay, so you just normally want the .com. You don't need like a .com/about or whatever, right? The crawler will do everything that it needs to do. You've also got Firecrawl here as well. If you wanted to do it through Firecrawl, which is a few more implementation steps, but they've already got a native web crawler, so that's the reason why I went with the native web crawler. Okay, so that's this one here, and then everything else I left it at default. The next thing you want to do is you want to select the extractor and chunking strategy. Okay, so I've covered chunking before on a previous video. Have a look at it, just Google it, go to Google Gemini and just type in chunking. They're going to explain it better with infographics than I can do. But it's just a way of retrieving that information and storing that information, right? And then for the execution strategy, they've got a few options. Okay, so they've got fast, which is simple, and fast extractor. This is usually the best option if your data is just text. If it's just text only, then go for fast. Okay. If you've got images, so if it's like blog posts, you've got PDFs, that kind of stuff, images, videos, all that kind of stuff, right? Then use the vectorized iris, which is their version of Whisper. Okay. If you're not sure, just go ahead with mixed, right? So I think I set it to mixed, or it might be fast if it's just text. If you're not sure, just go to mixed. And then chunking strategy, I just left that paragraph. The chunk size tokens I left at 500, and then in chunk overlap I set that to 50. Okay, and that seems to work. Again, this is about performance, right? The chunk overlaps and the chunk size, the higher, the more, the slower generally the performance gets. But the offset is quality. You get better quality in terms of when you retrieve that, when you have a conversation and you retrieve that data. Okay. And then for the embedder, I did a bring your own AI platform, and then I selected OpenAI. Okay. And the way to do this is you're going to need the API key from OpenAI. So if you haven't done that before, just click on add a new connector, head over to platform.openai.com, go to dashboards, API keys, and then just create a new API key. Okay, and I just called it vectorize.io, copy the secret key, head back over to vectorize, and then give it a name, and then just paste the key here. And that's it. Very, very straightforward. Okay, so select OpenAI. So I already got it set up there. And then for the embedding model, I just kept it too small. It just uses less tokens. You can actually go to large as well. If you do use large or small, just make a note of that, because that's important when we build out the automation inside of NA10, okay? And then the last thing you want to set up is the vector database, because now that we've scraped all that data, it needs to be indexed and stored somewhere. Okay, and so for that, I'm going to use Pinecone. So I've already built that in. But there's all these other options here. So, Milvus is very popular. SQL is very popular. VV8, there's Azure Superbase. I've used it in a previous video as well. But I'm going to use Pinecone for this, because generally when it comes to RAGs, I've just stuck to Pinecone because it's really easy to set up. Okay. Again, you want to add a new connector. I've already gone ahead and done that, but if you haven't, then just click on add a new connector. You're going to need the API key. So head over to pinecone.io, sign up for a free account if you haven't done so, and then go to API keys, create a new API key, and then just copy the key into where it says API key here, okay? And then once you're done, I'm just gonna go back because I've already done it. Just come out of this. I'm gonna do this, and then you just set up an index, okay? So if we go back into Pinecone, the way to do that is head over to databases. I think they give you 5 free indexes, right? So you can see I've already done one for Vectorize, but head over to create index, give it a name, and then for the configuration, I've selected small, right? Because remember, everything else is small. If the embedding model was large, then you need to make sure that this is set to large, okay? It has to be consistent, okay? But I've done small, and then for everything else, you can leave it serverless, AWS, and the region, all that. Keep that the same. And then just remember the name of the index, okay? Because we're gonna need to call that index inside of the init-n build, okay? Then once you've done that, all what you wanna do is give this index a name. So I'm gonna call it Vectorize. And then what you do is just deploy the RAG pipeline, okay? And what that does is this is now gonna trigger the automation. It's gonna scrape the Wait But Why website, the blog, and then basically it's going to start extracting all that information, and then you're going to see it. If I go back into my index, you'll see it already here. So you'll see all this, it'll start populating it. So, and the way to think of an index is that it's a database, that's it. But it's a very smart database because it's one that we can use the AI to retrieve information from, okay? So this will take a few minutes. Again, it depends on the volume. It depends on the number of documents you have in a G Drive, Dropbox, or how many articles your client has on SharePoint or OneDrive. This had a few pages, so you can see here it's going to go ahead and do this. I don't actually have that many free pages left on the free plan, but I just want to show you what it looks like once it's done. And you can see that it's going to index everything. The crawler started, and this is a really interesting game changer because back in the old days when I was scraping the web, I had to build a Python scraper. I had to host it myself. You don't have to use either VPNs or proxy servers, because if you hit the same website over and over again from the same IP address, you're going to get banned, okay? So now this is all taken care of. It's all kind of outsourced. All the messy stuff they handle in-house inside of a tool like Vectorize. And this is a really nice, clean way of doing it, okay? So the third step is going to be, let's build this out together in a new init-n workflow. The first node you need is a trigger node, and I'm going to use chat for this, because then we can have a conversation with the RAG, and we could obviously ask it questions, right? The next module is the AI agent. So this is the brains behind it all, right? This is the node that's going to manage everything. And for this, we don't actually need any other options. We just connect it all together. And then for the chat model, I've used OpenAI because I pay for it. If you haven't set it up, just create a connection inside of the node here with the create new credential, and you can get the API key from the same place inside of platform.openai.com, right? Just go to the dashboard, API key, and then just grab it and save it here, okay? I'm gonna use Foro Mini for this because it just works and it's very affordable. Doesn't use that many tokens. Okay, and that's like most of it done, right? If you go back to the original, we had the AI agent, we've got the chat model. The next thing we need is the Pinecone vector store, okay? Because that's where everything is saved. The data, the actual physical data that we're gonna interact with in the RAG is saved on Pinecone. So click on Tool. Let's bring up the Pinecone vector store. Again, if you haven't created a credential, just connect to the API here. And then for this, we're gonna use, what did I set it to? I mean, there is a few things here. You could probably get many. I left that at the default. But certainly test all the other ones. I mean, it's not insert documents, right? Because we already have the information. So yeah, try get many or retrieve documents as a tool for AI agent. I'm just going to use the default here. And then for the name, you just want to give it a name, right? You need a name and a description, otherwise you're not going to be able to save it, right? So I just called it a web crawler. It doesn't really matter, right? And then for the description, I'm just going to copy what I used here. Crawls the web using vectorize.io. So yeah, don't overthink this. And then the last thing you want to do is select the Pinecone index. So I called it vectorize or vectorize. Just remember whatever you call it. So if you're not sure, head over back to Pinecone, go into databases, and then I've created 2 indexes, right? So I can only see 2, but just remember whatever you called it, that's the name that you're going to select from the list here. And then for the limit, I think I set it to 10. So this is just the number of results from the vector store. Okay, so depending on how big your vector store is, if I go back into Pinecone here, right, this one had, I think, 1,000 something plus indexes. So yeah, it's gonna be huge, right? And then ultimately depends on how big your project is, right? If you're doing a massive project for a client that has thousands of knowledge base articles inside of SharePoint, then you probably want a larger limit. Okay, I'm just gonna leave this at 10 because it's enough for my example, and that's pretty much it, right, for that. And then the last thing you want to do is, if I just move this up, we'll just line this up. We're just going to need an embedding. So we're going to select the OpenAI one. Make sure you connect it up to your credentials. And remember, I use 3 small, right? So it should match whatever the index is set to, which is 3 small, and whatever vectorize is set to. So when I did the RAG pipeline, if I go back into there, I can show you. If I go to edit, so I actually use a free quota. I used a 3 small, right? Just to make sure that it's all consistent. Let's leave this and let's just go back into here. So I just want to show you, because this is now done, this is what it looks like, right? If everything is green and it's worked, then you'll just see green across the board. It's connected to Pinecone, the web crawler is working, the integration with OpenAI is working, the status is healthy, right? And then you've got all basically the event logs, like what's happened, right? And if you wanted to go inside of this, you can see actually what's happened here. It's only got to 73% because I've actually run out of the quota on the free plan. But if you're paying for this, you're not gonna have that problem. And it gives you some technical information about how many documents have been embedded, how many have been written, etc., etc. Okay. So back to the build here, we just want to set it to 3 small, or if you use a large, make sure you do that. Select that and just keep it consistent. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the build. Okay, so one last thing before I wrap up the video is you can actually go into production with this. So if I go back to the original build, go here, you can actually make this public, right? So you can take this and give this link to a client, so they can run this themselves, right? All you are then paid for is to manage the automation inside of NA10. And if I was you, I'll do this from your own personal NA10 account, right? Manage it all there, keep everything under the hood, and then just pay, give them a contract for a managed service, like a monthly retainer. Okay, you can edit the chats, you can change the message, the prompts, you can add subtitles, titles like this, and this is all very customizable. Okay, and before you can send them this chat URL, just make sure that the automation is active here. Okay, so heading back to Excalidraw, we've set up the vectorized pipeline, we've set up the integration to Pinecone, we've crawled any website, and we can chat with it. So let me just show you one last chat before I wrap up the video. So what is the latest blog post? And it shouldn't take too long because it's already indexed, right? It's not like we're crawling the website, the blog post, the blog right now, right? All we're doing is retrieving information that's already been saved in the index. And I just want to show you this as an example of what you can do here. So the latest blog post is a short list, a short history of my last 6 years, published on February 2013. Post reflects the author's experience and insights over the last 6 years. And you can read the full post here. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I really like the RAG space. I really like where it's going because there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of ways to monetize this, right? Because like I said at the start of the video, a lot of companies that I talk to have knowledge bases, they have data, but that data isn't being used, right? There's no return on investment. for the amount of money they're spending on this infrastructure, right? And their employees are not using this, and for the most part, they don't know how to use this, right? They're not really trained on SharePoint or any other systems. Whereas something like this, right? A chat window like this, if you just send them the chat window, super easy. They don't need to do anything else. It's just this, okay? So a lot of opportunity here. And if you like this video, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notifications on so you'll see my next video when it drops. Thanks for watching and have a great day.